They told me she wasn't worth saving, just another enemy prisoner, dangerous, broken, a burden we couldn't afford. They said the smart thing was to sign the release forms, turn my back, and let her disappear into whatever dark hole the war would swallow her in. But then I saw her, sitting in the shadows, chains biting into her wrists, her head lifting just enough for our eyes to meet. And in that single moment, I didn't see an enemy. I didn't see a threat. I saw a survivor, someone who had fought harder and longer than anyone had the right to. I saw a life worth saving, no matter the cost. So I made my choice. And if it means defying orders, risking my career, even starting a war of my own, then so be it. Because some things are worth more than survival. And she is one of them. The prison transport smelled of metal, rust, and fear. Even before I stepped inside, I could hear the dull hum of the shock restraints, the heavy breathing of soldiers who had seen too much war and didn't care to see any more. They weren't here to guard her. They were here to keep people like me away. She was sitting in the farthest corner, chained to the wall like a dangerous animal, her knees drawn up to her chest. The dim light flickered, casting shifting shadows over her face, and for a moment I couldn't even tell what species she was, only that her posture screamed exhaustion and defiance all at once. The guards didn't bother hiding their disdain. "She's not your problem, Captain. Command says she's scheduled for transfer. You don't want to get mixed up in this." I almost turned away. Almost. But then she moved, just slightly, lifting her head enough for our eyes to lock. They were the kind of eyes you didn't forget, no matter how many years passed. Wide, luminous, and haunted. Not with fear exactly, but something deeper, heavier, like she'd already seen the worst life could throw at her and somehow survived it. Her lips parted, but no words came out, only the faintest tremor of breath. She didn't need to speak. That single look told me everything. She'd been fighting for so long she didn't know how to stop, but she was running out of time. "How long has she been here?" I asked, keeping my voice low. One of the guards shrugged. 3 days. Picked her up on the outskirts after the raid. She hasn't said a word. Won't eat. Won't drink. Like I said, not your problem. Not my problem. That was the line everyone liked to use these days. If you made it your problem, you risked more than your career. You risked making enemies you couldn't afford. I should have walked away. But my boots carried me forward until I was standing just a meter from her. She didn't flinch when I knelt, didn't pull back when I looked her over. She was thinner than she should have been, clothes torn in too many places to count, wrists rubbed raw where the cuffs dug in. But beneath all of that, she was alive. "I'm Captain Rourke," I said quietly, not caring that the guards were listening. "What's your name?" She blinked slowly, almost like she was deciding whether I was real. Then, in a voice barely louder than the hum of the restraints, she whispered something. I didn't catch the word, but I caught the way her voice shook, like speaking after all this time cost her more strength than she had to spare. And in that moment, I knew walking away wasn't an option. The auctioneer's voice sliced through the humid air like a whip, calling for starting offers. I could feel eyes on me from the moment I raised my hand. Curious, hostile, judging. The girl knelt on the platform beside the others, her wrists bound in cold, blackened chains, the iron biting into skin already raw from use. She didn't look up at the crowd, only glanced from beneath her tangled hair whenever a particularly loud bid rang out, her gaze sharp yet weary. The first bid came from a man with scars crisscrossing his throat. His smile was all teeth, and none of it was kind. Another voice joined, a woman in a long leather coat, her eyes narrowed like a hawk eyeing prey. Their tones were dripping with greed, their stares lingering on her as if already plotting what they'd do once she was theirs. My own bid was quiet, deliberate, not shouted, but firm enough to turn a few heads. The scowl started immediately. The man in the leather coat's corner leaned toward her, muttering, then smirking in my direction. The scarred man upped the price, his jaw tightening, his glare saying this wasn't just about the girl anymore. It was about putting me down. The crowd began murmuring, the air thickening with tension. Even the auctioneer's rhythm shifted, his calls faster, sharper, feeding the rivalry. I matched every counter without hesitation. My pulse was steady, but my jaw was clenched hard enough to ache. I wasn't here to lose her to people who saw her as a thing. The bidding became a duel, each call louder, each glare sharper, until the scarred man finally leaned back, growling something under his breath. The auctioneer slammed his hand down on the podium, calling it sold, to me. For a heartbeat, the air seemed to hold still. Then came the murmurs, the whispers. I felt them behind me, stares burning holes between my shoulder blades, a few muttered warnings about meddling in what doesn't concern you. The girl's eyes found mine for a brief second, just a flicker, and I thought I saw it, the faintest spark of disbelief. She didn't speak as they unlocked her chains, nor when I stepped forward to lead her away. She kept her head low, her movements small, almost calculated to take up less space. But when my hand brushed the edge of the chain to keep it from scraping her skin, she stilled. Not flinching, just still. Her first sign of hesitation in the presence of a stranger. Outside, the air was cooler, but the weight of stairs followed. Footsteps shuffled behind us. I led her toward the exit gate, scanning the crowd's edges. Just before we stepped through, a shadow moved across the path, broad shoulders, gloved hands, eyes hidden beneath the brim of a hat. His stance was casual, but his voice carried steel. You just paid a lot of money for trouble, stranger. Turn her over, and you walk out breathing. The cell door groaned open, metal hinges screaming like they hadn't been touched in years. The human stepped inside, his boots scraping against the stone floor. She tensed, every instinct screaming to fight, but his hands held no weapon, only a small metal key. Without a word, he knelt before her, the torchlight catching the lines of exhaustion on his face. Her chains rattled as he worked at the lock, the click echoing louder than any battle horn she'd ever heard. The weight around her wrists and ankles fell away, and for the first time in years, her skin felt the air without cold steel biting into it. She didn't run. She didn't even move. She just stared at him, breathing hard, like her body didn't believe it was real. He reached into a leather satchel and pulled out a bundle, a folded, clean set of clothes and a small packet of food. You need this more than I do, he said softly, placing them beside her. The smell of the food hit her like a memory, warm bread, salted meat. Her hands shook as she took it, biting into it so quickly that she barely chewed, but when her eyes flicked up to him, he wasn't watching in judgment, only quiet concern. The clothes were simple, brown wool, worn but soft, and she hesitated before pulling them close. In another life, she had worn armor plated in black steel, marked with the insignia of her people. She had been feared then, respected, but war had stripped her of everything, and now she was a shadow of that warrior. She didn't tell him her full story, only fragments slipped out as they walked together through the dim corridors. How she had once led soldiers, how she'd been captured in a battle she should have died in, how her people were scattered to the wind. He listened without interrupting, but she could see the questions behind his eyes. They reached the outer gates, and the night sky opened above them, so wide, so free, it hurt to look at it. She stopped, breathing in the cold air like it was the first time she'd ever felt it. Why? She finally asked. Why risk yourself for me? He looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because no one should live in chains. Something in her chest ached at those words. She had learned long ago never to owe anyone anything, but this debt was one she wanted to carry. She didn't tell him aloud, but she made the vow silently, sealing it as firmly as any warrior's oath. She would stand by him. No matter where this path led, he would not walk it alone. As they stepped beyond the gates, the moonlight washing over them, she no longer felt like a prisoner being led to freedom. She felt like an equal walking beside an ally. And though they had started as strangers, rescuer and rescued, by the time they disappeared into the darkness beyond the fortress walls, they were something far more dangerous to their enemies. They were a team,